The first time Commander Helrix saw a human drink coffee, he genuinely believed the man was attempting suicide. It was early morning aboard the United Coalition vessel Zhenari, orbiting the outer rim planet of Alken 4. The human Hayden Brooks, a civil engineer from Nebraska turned interspecies infrastructure consultant, was assigned to the Joint Human-Zerali Terraforming Unit. Hayden had been brought in for his experience dealing with unstable soil compositions in high radiation zones on Earth, which incidentally resembled Alken 4's crust more than anyone had anticipated. Helrix, being the Zerali delegation's senior liaison, had spent nearly 4 months observing humans. He'd read the briefings, watched their training footage, and attended lectures on their physiology. But nothing in his preparation had warned him about the bitter, black liquid. Hayden stood next to a modular diagnostic rig, bleary-eyed, clutching a thermos like it was a vital organ. His movements were sluggish, unfocused, until he took a long pull from the container. Immediately he grimaced, inhaled sharply, and muttered something unintelligible. Helrix froze, his narrow pupils contracting. "Did you just consume poison?" he asked, stepping closer, his translator blinking with urgency. Hayden raised an eyebrow, took another sip, and exhaled with satisfaction. "What, this? Now, man! That's coffee." Helrix tilted his head. "You ingest it voluntarily?" "Every morning." Helix's limbs stiffened. "It has a bitter chemical profile. High acidity. Alkaloids consistent with toxic warning markers. It activated my emergency alert sensors." Hayden chuckled, then immediately winced and rubbed his temple. "Yeah, it's not exactly apple juice, but it gets the job done. You get used to it. You actively adapt to a substance that causes your nervous system distress?" "It's called a caffeine boost," Hayden said, taking another sip. "I don't function without it. Seriously. I tried quitting once, got headaches, insomnia, mood swings. It was like detoxing from bad moonshine." Helrix turned to his assistant Node and initiated a full chemical breakdown of the fluid. "Your species willingly consumes a plant-based neurostimulant with addictive properties and mild toxicity as part of a daily ritual?" "Yeah, want a taste?" Helrix recoiled. "Absolutely not." The diagnostic rig beeped, and Hayden set down the thermos. "All right, coffee break's over. Let's see if the soil stabilizers recalibrated overnight." Helrix didn't respond immediately. He stared at the thermos for several seconds, then followed Hayden to the equipment console, his sensors still registering confusion. Later that day, Helrix called a private session with the Zerali medical team. "I require a full psychological profile on Hayden Brooks," he said. "There is something deeply illogical in voluntarily consuming a substance that mimics low-level poisoning and calling it morning coffee." For the next few days, Helrix shadowed Hayden more closely than before. He noted everything: the way Hayden's mood lifted post-ingestion, how he became more alert and coherent, and how the other humans in the crew mirrored the behavior with their own coffee rituals. It wasn't a solitary habit, it was cultural. On the 4th day, Helrix approached the human biologist, Dr. Tessa Fairwin, while she was analyzing sediment cores in Lab Module C. "Dr. Fairwin," Helrix began, "I am attempting to understand the human coffee consumption phenomenon. Is it a form of collective masochism?" Tessa blinked twice, then laughed. No, it's just caffeine dependency. Everyone's got something. Some cultures chew cocoa leaves, some drink yerba mate. We just happen to have coffee. It wakes us up, helps us focus. There's a whole history behind it. It is chemically inconsistent with a survival instinct. Not everything we do is about survival. Sometimes it's just coping. Coffee helps us be functional in environments that weren't meant for us." Helrix tapped his console, recording the answer. "So it is an adaptation mechanism." "Exactly. You should see Hayden without it. He almost reversed the polarity on a gravity pump last week before his first cup." Helrix filed away the information, but remained unsettled. That evening, Hayden was calibrating a subsurface seismic probe when he slipped on a patch of lubricating gel left by a malfunctioning drone. He hit the ground hard, his left leg twisting under him. A loud, unnatural pop echoed through the corridor. "Ah, Jesus, that's bad," Hayden hissed, clutching his shin. Helix was at his side in seconds. "Do not move. Your limb appears compromised." Hayden laughed, then bit down on his lip. "I think I broke something." The med team arrived within 4 minutes. A portable scanner confirmed a tibial fracture. He was stabilized on site and transported to the infirmary, where a full scan confirmed the break was clean, but would require immobilization for 6 weeks, followed by another 6 of physical therapy. Hayden didn't protest. He lay quietly, face pale, breath shallow. Helrix sat beside the medical console, watching the human's vitals, noting the drop in blood pressure and the pain management protocols. "Does coffee alleviate this kind of distress?" Helrix asked softly. Hayden smiled weakly. "Not even close, but it'll help when I have to sit through the rehab meetings." Helix turned back to the console, recording another note. Over the following weeks, Hayden's absence from the field was palpable. The rest of the terraforming team adjusted, but the system recalibrations lagged. Helrix took over some of Hayden's logistics review work to stay close to the process. Every morning, he noticed the same pattern. The other humans would gather, bleary-eyed, mugs in hand, each with their own version of the bitter drink. It was a private ceremony, unspoken but understood. One morning, Tessa walked into the lab with 2 mugs. "Here," she said, handing one to Helrix. He blinked. "You are offering me poison. It's decaf, mostly." He took it, sniffed cautiously. The aroma was pungent, earthy, and oddly comforting. He sipped. His entire face tightened in discomfort. Because it's not about the taste. It's about the ritual. We start our day with it. It's like a reset button. When everything else is unpredictable, this stays the same. Helrix studied the mug. Ritualized ingestion of a bitter neurochemical compound to establish psychological equilibrium in uncertain conditions. More or less. Helix took another sip. It wasn't pleasant, but he understood it now. Coffee was not a beverage. It was a statement. A declaration that no matter how alien the world, no matter how brutal the morning, humanity would anchor itself in something familiar, even if it tasted like burnt tree bark. 2 weeks later, Hayden returned to limited duty, using a crutch and walking with a noticeable limp. His first stop wasn't the lab or the field command. It was the galley. He poured a cup, leaned against the counter, and took a long, slow sip. That's it," he said. Helrix approached. "Welcome back." "Miss me?" "Your absence disrupted the recalibration schedule." Hayden grinned. "I'll take that as a yes." Helix looked at the mug in his hand. "I have begun ingesting coffee." Hayden raised an eyebrow. "Seriously?" Helix nodded. "Decaffeinated. I intend to study its cultural impact further." "Careful," Hayden said, pouring himself another. "That's how it starts." Helix paused. "I have a question. If humans develop physiological dependence on a bitter, mildly toxic substance to cope with hostile environments, what happens when it is removed?" Hayden was quiet for a moment. "Withdrawal, headaches, fatigue, irritability. But we adapt. We always do." Helix recorded the answer. That night he sat in his quarters, holding a half-empty mug. He watched the stars drift past the viewport and considered how a creature so fragile, whose bones broke from a slip and whose mood hinged on a bean extract, had managed to reach this far. Coffee wasn't a weakness, it was a bridge. And for the first time in his long career, Helrix began to understand what it truly meant to be human. Helrix entered the human infirmary with a datapad tucked beneath one arm and a sealed sample vial in the other. The vial contained a pale yellow extract, recently synthesized from the native Keltrid fungus found beneath Alkanfor's northern crust shelf. It pulsed faintly under containment. He stopped at the foot of Hayden's diagnostic bed, where the human sat upright, legs still braced but no longer elevated. His crutch leaned against the wall, untouched. "Is that for me?" Hayden's eyes narrowed at the vial. "Because last time someone brought me something glowing, I hallucinated a conversation with my high school math teacher." "It is inert," Helrix replied. "This compound is part of behavioral study. I require your participation." Hayden scratched his jaw. "I'm still on restricted duty. This is non-kinetic participation, sensory analysis only." "All right," Hayden said, reaching for the vial with 2 fingers. "But if this makes my spleen vibrate?" "We're having a serious talk." Helrix watched as Hayden uncapped the vial and took a cautious sniff. "Smells like wet drywall and mango peel. You are remarkably adept at olfactory parsing. Comes with growing up in a house with 6 uncles and questionable fridge habits." Helix made a notation. "Fascinating. The compound is structurally similar to human dopamine precursors, but delivered via non-mammalian biochemical pathways. We wish to test whether your species can metabolize it without entering a delirious state." Hayden raised one brow. "You mean you found space fungus that might make people happy, and now you want to see if I turn into a giggling mess or start quoting Shakespeare? That is one possible outcome. Well, bottoms up." He tipped the vial into his mouth and grimaced instantly. The B labeled ad. "Tastes like fermented celery." He waited. Helrix activated a secondary scanner, observing vitals. Heart rate elevated slightly. Pupil dilation increased. Cortisol levels dropping. "You appear calmer." "Yeah, I feel weirdly mellow, like I just finished yelling at a printer, and now the printer apologized." Helix tapped a control. "Curious. The Zhenari experienced tactile hallucinations from this compound. You are unaffected cognitively?" "Well, I'm not seeing colors talk to each other, if that's what you mean. It's filtering the stimulant's receptor binding differently." Hayden leaned back. "That's either good or terrifying. I believe it confirms our central hypothesis, which is that your species' neuroplasticity exceeds our projected tolerance models. You can adapt to nearly any psychotropic compound without catastrophic system failure. Let me guess, that's unusual, unprecedented." Hayden grinned. "You should have seen what we did with nutmeg in the 17th century. Helrix did not respond immediately. He was reviewing the scan results as Hayden's dopamine levels rose steadily. But serotonin markers remained stable. No signs of hallucination. No convulsive feedback loops. Just mild euphoria. "Your physiology continues to defy standardized models," Helrix said finally. "We observed similar anomalies after you consumed the spiced root paste from Sector 12. It induces seizures in 3 out of 4 coalition species. I just thought it tasted like cinnamon with a grudge." Helix paused the scan. "This may explain your species' rapid colonization strategy. You do not require environmental conformity. You alter your internal responses instead." "Yeah. Flexibility is kind of our thing. We've lived in deserts, frozen tundras, underwater habitats, and one guy in Alberta tried living in a tree for 12 years. Was he successful? Depends on your definition of success. He wrote a book." Helix stared at the remaining sample residue in the vial. "Your kind's adaptability is not merely physical. It is behavioral, cultural, even recreational." Hayden nodded. "We don't wait for the world to be ready for us. We just make it work. That is profoundly disorienting. Welcome to the club." There was a soft chime from the overhead panel. Tessa Fairwind's voice filtered through the comm. "Hayden, you're due for your musculoskeletal scan in Lab Theta." "Already?" Hayden sighed and shifted his weight forward. "Can't wait to get professionally told I walk like a malfunctioning crane." He grabbed the crutch and stood with a grunt. Helrix followed him into the corridor. "You're still observing? Till the behavioral study concludes? You're not worried this thing's going to wear off and I'll start weeping uncontrollably about childhood pets? We have containment protocols." "Comforting." They passed a pair of Zhenari technicians murmuring in low tones about magnetic field interference. One gave Hayden a wide berth, eyes fixed on the human's exposed knee brace. Hayden caught the look. "Still not used to injuries?" "They are rare among us. Our regenerative capacity is significantly higher." "Yeah, well, we don't bounce back like rubber. But we get there eventually. Helrix tilted his head. With metal supports, and chemical aids, and persistence. Exactly. They reached the lab. Tessa was already inside, calibrating the scanner. "You're late," she said, not looking up. "I was taste testing alien antidepressants," Hayden replied. "Might have joined a cult in the process, still figuring it out." Tessa glanced over. "You're flushed." "He metabolized the keltrid extract," Helix explained. "No adverse effects." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "You're kidding." "Not in the least." Hayden settled onto the scanner bed. "Just add it to the list of things we shouldn't survive, but do." "Helrix," she said, "are you keeping physiological records on all of us?" "Yes." "Even the caffeine intake patterns?" "Yes." "Even all of it?" Tessa sighed. "We're going to become case studies, aren't we?" "You already are." Hayden chuckled. "At least I'll be famous for drinking fungus juice and surviving." The scan began, humming softly. Tessa monitored the readouts while Helrix stood by, silently comparing the new neurochemical profile with the previous data. After several minutes, the machine beeped. Tessa's brows furrowed. "Your tibia's showing micro-fissure healing ahead of schedule. Good or bad?" "Good, but unusual. Your body's regenerating about 20% faster than projected." Helix stepped closer. "Does this correlate with the extract's neuromodulatory effect?" "Possibly. It could be stimulating parasympathetic recovery." Hayden blinked. "So you're saying the space shroom made my bones heal quicker?" "Maybe. Or your body's just decided to skip protocol again." Helix made a long note on his pad. "You appear incapable of following expected biological timelines." "Tell that to my metabolism. I once gained 12 pounds in a week from looking at a deep dish pizza." Tessa shut down the scanner. "You're cleared for assisted mobility training. Just don't sprint." "Wasn't planning on it. Unless someone drops a donut down the corridor." Helix followed Hayden as he hobbled toward the exit. "I would like to document your locomotion pattern at various recovery benchmarks." "Sure," Hayden said. "Just don't ask me to model. I draw the line at posing with alien supplements." They turned the corner and entered the corridor leading back to the central module. A group of Zhenari science officers stood clustered near the atmospheric exchange unit. One of them glanced sharply at Hayden, then leaned to whisper something to the others. Helix caught it. "That is the one who consumed the keltrid." They stepped aside as Hayden passed. "I think I'm getting a reputation," he muttered. "You are becoming a symbol." "Of what, exactly?" "Biological impudence." Hayden snorted. "Can I put that on my personnel file?" Helrix didn't answer. He was watching the other Zhenari, who continued to observe Hayden with a mixture of disbelief and wariness. When they reached the human habitat pod, Helix paused. "I will submit today's findings to the Coalition's Central Archive. It is likely your species will be reclassified." "As what?" "Biologically anomalous, behaviorally unpredictable, culturally incomprehensible." Hayden opened the door. "Sounds accurate." "Also," Helrix added, "we may need to restrict access to your dietary customs. Several Zhenari consumed your beef jerky and experienced extended gastrointestinal dissonance. Tell them to try it with mustard next time." Helix made no comment as he turned and walked away, his datapad already compiling a new entry under Coalition Behavioral Anomalies, Human Resilience Index. Inside his quarters, Hayden lowered himself into the chair, exhaled, and stared at the empty coffee thermos on his desk. He briefly considered refilling it, but instead leaned back, eyes unfocused, letting the quiet hum of the station settle around him. Somewhere inside his bones, things were knitting themselves back together faster than they should, and for reasons no one completely understood. But that was fine. He didn't need to understand it. He just needed to keep going. 3 days after the keltrid extract trial, Hayden was cleared for full-duty rotations, though his gait still betrayed a hitch if you watched long enough. Most didn't. The Zhenari had grown accustomed to human oddities, especially those involving limping engineers who grinned through joint pain and asked too many questions about mineral-binding agents. Helrix, however, noticed everything. He waited at the compound's main access gate, where the geothermal regulators hummed in their late afternoon cycle. Hayden arrived in his standard exo vest, a fresh sleeve of diagnostics tucked under one arm, and a hydration pouch strapped across his back. "I thought you were scheduled for atmospheric recalibration drills," Helrix said without preamble. "Finished early. Turns out if you yell at a sensor long enough, it starts behaving. It is not scientifically sound. Neither is my knee, but here we are." Helrix motioned toward the east perimeter. "The Keltrid compound has prompted further inquiries. There are more fungal colonies along the Glacial trench. I require assistance retrieving samples." Hayden adjusted his wrist brace. "You really know how to show a guy a good time." They walked in silence for several minutes, the terrain crunching under their boots. The trench was flanked by layered deposits of sulfate-rich ice, glistening with frozen vapor. Hover drones traced lazy arcs overhead, scanning for structural shifts. As they approached the descent platform, Helrix handed Hayden a secondary scanner. "You will monitor thermal variance. The deeper colonies may exhibit temperature-induced chemical deviation. So we're looking for mood swings in mushrooms." Helrix didn't respond. They descended carefully. The lift creaked as it lowered into the lightless crevice, the temperature dropping steadily. Hayden clicked on his shoulder lamp, casting long shadows against the jagged walls. "This place reminds me of a limestone quarry I fell into once," he said. "Tore up both palms, lost my lunch, and found a fossilized fish. Good day, all things considered." "You often encounter danger recreationally?" "Not on purpose, but it happens." At 30 meters, the lift halted. The trench opened into a narrow shelf where clusters of the Keltrid fungus glowed faintly, their caps translucent and pulsing with internal bioluminescence. Helrix stepped forward, scanning the growths. "These are more mature than surface samples. Their chemical profile may vary significantly." Hayden kneeled beside a patch, reaching carefully with gloved fingers. "You ever wonder why this stuff doesn't affect us the way it affects you? Constantly? I mean, your species has 2 circulatory filters and a secondary blood oxygen exchange organ. You'd think you'd be more resistant. We are, to most stimuli. Then why not this?" Helrix was quiet for a moment. "Your neural systems are chaotic, unrefined, but they allow for flexibility. You absorb instability by dispersing it. We're not refined, we're just messy. Messy is resilient." Hayden tapped the scanner. "I'll take that as a compliment." They collected 7 samples in total. Each was sealed in a vacuum canister and labeled with location, temperature, and colony density. The process took nearly an hour, during which Hayden's knee began to stiffen again. He shifted his weight every few minutes to compensate, but didn't say anything. Helrix noticed. "You are exceeding your mobility window." "I'll manage." "You could have refused this task." "I could have, but then you'd be down here alone trying to bag psychedelic mushrooms with a set of claws." Helrix blinked. "I am capable of fine motor tasks. You use a stylus the way I use a chainsaw." They returned to the lift and began the ascent. As they reached the surface, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the compound in orange twilight. The air was dry, tinged with the scent of heated alloy. Back inside the research module, Helrix placed the samples into the containment vault, activating the chemical isolation fields. Hayden leaned against the workbench, rotating his knee slowly. Tessa entered moments later, holding a data slate. "Got your metabolic readouts," she said, turning the screen toward Hayden. "You're still processing the Keltrid compound. Trace amounts are showing up in your sweat." "Is that bad?" "Not unless you plan on licking your own elbow." He raised his brow. "That a common concern?" "Not until you showed up." Helrix watched the exchange, then turned to Tessa. "Has his neurochemical balance stabilized?" Mostly, there's a slight uptick in norepinephrine, but it's within acceptable parameters. Could this elevation contribute to his accelerated recovery? Possibly. The compound might be modulating his adrenal response. Hayden scratched his jaw. So I'm healing faster because my body thinks I'm in a constant low-grade emergency? Basically. Helix folded his hands. Your species appears to thrive under stress. Tessa nodded. It's how we're wired. Stress sharpens focus, boosts immune response, accelerates tissue repair. That seems evolutionarily inefficient. Hayden shrugged. It's not pretty, but it works. Tessa handed him a nutrient capsule. You need more potassium. Your muscle receptors are twitching. He swallowed it dry. Love being a science experiment. You volunteered? I said I liked fungus. That's not consent to become a lab rat. Helrix turned toward the console, entering the latest data. You have contributed significantly to our understanding of cross-species neurochemical compatibility. Glad to help, just don't name a disease after me. The world was still. There was no disease. Yeah. Tessa closed her slate. You'll be pleased to know the Coalition Board is reviewing your case report. They are considering revising the Human Risk Index. In which direction? Downward. Apparently, you're less fragile than we assumed. Hayden beamed. We aim to disappoint. Alex stood quietly for a moment. Your kind continues to unsettle our models. You consume bitter acids for stimulation, adapt to foreign compounds, and recover from injury through psychological momentum. Hayden stretched his leg. It's not momentum. It's refusal. Refusal of what? To stop, to wait, to give up. Coffee's not about liking the taste. It's about refusing to be tired. Tessa chuckled. That's the most human thing I've heard all week. Helix turned back to the vault. I will compile the findings and submit the behavioral report. Your cooperation in this study has been enlightening. Hayden stood, testing his weight. Glad to be of service. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to sit in a hot mineral bath until my bones remember they're not supposed to creak. Tessa waved him off. Try not to dissolve. He left the lab, the door hissing shut behind him. Helrix remained still as the containment vault cycled into low-temperature stasis. The glow from the Keltrid samples dimmed slightly, settling into a soft blue hue. What do you make of it? Tessa asked. Heme violates every model we constructed. Maybe that's the model. Helix considered this in silence. Outside, the compound lights flickered on as night settled over Alcyon 4. In the distance, a maintenance drone buzzed along the perimeter fence, its sensor array casting brief shadows across the frost. Inside the lab, the vault sealed with a final hiss. It was done. The data was collected. The results were logged. No anomalies remained unresolved, no theories untested. And yet, Helrix found himself watching the now empty bench where Hayden had rested, wondering not how such a being endured, but why. Why, when given the option of comfort, humanity chose discomfort? Why, when faced with the unknown, they didn't retreat but boiled water, drank bitterness, and pressed forward? There was no answer in the data. But perhaps, Helrix thought, that was the answer.